agentic may be the company buzzword of 2026, but what does this word actually mean, and how can we use these AI agentic tools to our advantage in bug bounty? And we're going to find it out today, as I'm going to walk you through some of the features I've discovered with Claude Code, mainly some of the customization features around some of the things. Most of them are going to be pretty standard, but some of them I literally just discovered as I was preparing for the video. So it is going to be very interesting, and we're going to jump right in. Hello, I'm down here in the bottom right corner today just because I'm going to forget the camera again and block half the screen. But this is just a Linux terminal that I'm in. It's just the standard Ubuntu terminal. And I assume that you have a double-digit IQ and you know how to install Claude Code, or you have Claude Code and you can just ask it how to install it. So I'm not going to go through that. I imagine that you don't know how to install Claude, you know how to log into an account and stuff like that. So what you're going to do, first of all, is I just created this random folder, which is going to be my Claude demo for today. And then obviously once you install the tool, you can run Claude, and then you can actually get into the Claude Code menu. And normally when I run it, you want to run it with this permission, this flag specifically called dangerously skip permissions. And the reason is that you don't want to press yes every single time Claude wants to do something. Now, with a little bit of a caveat is that you might want to run this in a Docker container if you're doing it. And there's a project actually I'm going to link in the description, which allows you to run Claude in a Docker container and already have a lot of the cybersecurity tools installed. I think it's called CloudBox, but anyway, I'm going to link it. I made my own version of it for some reason, but yeah, I just have that set up. But for now, I'm just going to run it in my normal terminal, just not to complicate things. And once you run it, you should have Claude working and stuff like that. But now you're kind of working with the default Claude. So this is default Claude. We haven't done any configurations with it, and we basically haven't set up any skills or whatever. So we're working with the default here, which is kind of not what we want, right? We want to customize Claude so that it knows things about us, and we can recycle that every single time and build up knowledge, and then scale up our hackbot, and then start finding vulnerabilities that the default Claude will not be able to find. So we need to find out how to do that. And the first kind of main thing that you want to do is you want to set up this CLAUDE.md file. So the CLAUDE.md file, you can just think of it as a system prompt basically. I don't know why it's not even called a system prompt or whatever, but basically in the folder that you start Claude in, or I think you can also put it in the actual Claude folder if you want to have it running on every single session, but we're just going to do it for now on this little project. We're going to nano a file called CLAUDE.md, and we can just code it here, right? So .md is a markdown file, and most of these Claude kind of configuration files are in markdown. So they're going to be parsed as markdown. And for this one, there's no kind of special layout, in the skills file. It's going to be a bit different, and I'll show you that later. But for this one, you can just type whatever text you want to. Now, what are we going to put in this CLAUDE.md file? Well, I've highlighted a few things that you want to put in. And the first thing is you just want to tell Claude about yourself. And I kind of brought this in from ChatGPT. I used to use ChatGPT earlier, and there was a way to personalize ChatGPT with some of the things that you wanted to tell it. So what are we going to do with this CLAUDE.md file? What are we actually going to put in here? And I've highlighted a few things you want to put in here. And the first thing is usually something about yourself. So I took this from ChatGPT back in the day when these AI models were Claude Code wasn't a thing, and there was GPT-3 was the best thing that we had. And what you could do is you could put a little bit of a line of text, some system prompt about yourself that basically told it a little bit. I remember being in this boot camp or whatever. It was this event for tech people, and this guy was on the stage, and he was talking about these huge AI things. You could now personalize ChatGPT. You can put in things about yourself. That was crazy. And every time you message ChatGPT, it would have some context about you, and that kind of blew my mind. I was oh wait, so we can actually tell this AI model about ourselves. And now that's a feature on every single AI coding agent, and now the coding agents can do research about you and stuff. So it's definitely interesting how far we've come. But yeah, basically what I used to do was I used to just put something like this, about the user or something, about the user or whatever. And in Markdown, this is how you kind of put headings in. So you would put slashes, and the more slashes, the actual lower the heading is. Just a bit counterintuitive. So this is like the biggest heading you can pull, and this is like just the one below. So it's kind of like a H2 tag in HTML. Kind of how you can think about it. And I usually put some kind of bullet points just to tell basically Claude what I'm doing. So I would say that, you know, I work as a bug bounty hunter, and I would put in another line which tells my favorite vulnerabilities. I would put in something about what applications I like looking at, what kind of features I like testing, and stuff like this, just so Claude knows what I actually like doing, and it's kind of going to be incentivized to do it. Now, just a caveat before I start this, you can actually write a lot of this with Claude. Like, you can actually ask it to write this stuff. I don't like writing this CLAUDE.md file with Claude because I feel like it makes it too long and it kind of doesn't include what I wanted to do. So I usually wrote this one by hand, but the skills file we will write using Claude. And, you know, that's just to preface this, that you can write this stuff with Claude. Maybe you prefer that, maybe you can try that as well, but I prefer to write it by hand. So we're going to text Claude here. I'm going to say like my favorite vulnerability types are, say, like race conditions and like SSRF and I don't know, AWS vulnerabilities. Sure, we'll put those three down as my favorite vulnerabilities, and we'll, you know, continue talking about ourselves. And this is the section that you want to fill out with who you are, you know, what you're looking for, and, you know, what Claude should know about you, specifically just guiding it towards things that you want it to be interested in. So the second part that is absolutely compulsory on Claude is some section that talks about impact, because Claude, as far as I know, is kind of made to be more like a pen testing bot versus we're doing bug bounty. So what we needed to do is to highlight to Claude that it needs to judge certain vulnerabilities a certain way. One of the things I always like to put in is that cross-site scripting is usually capped as high. So anything that requires user input is on most programs going to be considered high and not critical. So like clicking a link, that's what I would tell it. Blind SSRF as well is definitely nowhere near high or even medium. It's probably low on most programs unless you can show some impact, where, you know, if it's just like reading a port, then it's obviously just going to be, you know, low. And also tracking injection, tracking spoofing or whatever, flag these as informational immediately, just so it doesn't actually record this as data. So I'm just going to type some of that in now. I'm going to say if a vulnerability requires user input, so I'm going to say XSS CSRF, impact is capped at high. So for example, something like this, right? And then you can say like blind SSRF with no other impact except like port enumeration or like service enumeration. I forgot to check service enumeration actually. Except service enumeration is capped at low. So we can talk about these kind of vulnerabilities, and you can add other things. If you see it consistently flagging something that is not really a vulnerability, then you can put it here and you can just tell it to stop, and you can put it inside your CLAUDE.md file. But this honestly is going to help a little bit, but not that much, and you're still going to get these weird vulnerabilities flagged. But we can at least put this here and basically tell Claude to at least try and avoid these kind of critical finds that are actually not critical. And actually, I should have said before this, I think you should also put some kind of like behavior or general like introduction section. So this is going to be like a section where you tell Claude that you're doing authorized security research, which so that in the future, it's not going to ask you whether or not it's actually authorized or whatever. So like you can say, you know, you are a bug bounty hunter doing authorized security research on a target, and that's just gonna hopefully prevent triggering certain safeguards, which are going to, you know, maybe limit your Claude, especially if you're using Opus 4.7 and if you're not in the cybersecurity program for Claude or whatever. So if you type that in, another thing I see it often fail on trying to make POCs that exfiltrate data. So this often triggers safeguards for Claude. So I would probably put in here at some point in this behavior section that, you know, you should like never build POCs that exfiltrate data or like leak API keys or whatever. And I would just say like leave that to the user, maybe just have the user try and do that or whatever. Maybe build some of these, like you can kind of get around these safeguards, but what you don't want is you leaving Claude to work and then coming back and it's been blocked because it tried to build an exploit that basically got flagged. Especially since it really likes leaving verbose comments inside the scripts that like you just read it and it's like it just sounds like a red flag. So I usually prefer to either instruct Claude carefully to build these scripts without, you know, flagging any of these safeguards, or just build them myself. So that's kind of what I like to do with this. Now, the next thing I would instruct Claude to do is to try and get some way for Claude to report what it's found in a consistent way. So for example, we should set up this like reporting section, and we want to kind of create like a consistent file structure in whatever project we're in. And this is actually what I do. So what I tell Claude to do is for every new target to create a directory for that target. And inside I have 2 specific files that I ask it to use for basically reporting either vulnerabilities or some kind of gadgets that I can use later. So the way we would do that is we would say like for every new target, create a directory inside the project, like, and then you'd say something like target name like this. For example, you'd have it that, actually just because Markdown I might not like that, just make it like this instead. And then I would give it some examples because it's probably not going to understand what that means. So I would say like, for example, if I ask you to hack on Google, create a directory like Google. There you go, that's all you need. And then it's going to create a new directory for everything, and it's just going to keep everything nice and stored correctly. And then inside of those directories, what I would tell Claude to do is just to basically create 2 standard files and just log all the kind of main reports to those 2 files, just so everything is going to be nice and organized, and now you can find everything. And most importantly, Claude knows where to find everything. Whenever you continue something later, you can just say, oh, read these 2 files and you're going to be caught up to speed on everything that we found on this target, for example. So you could say like, this is the folder structure for this directory. And you can say like, Google like this, and then you can say like this. You can put like vulnerabilities .md, and then you can say like, this is for high severity vulnerabilities. Again, the high severity doesn't do anything on Claude. It's going to still put like random shit here. But yeah, you can put like that there. And then you can put a second file like gadgets.md like this. And you can be like, this is for gadgets like below medium severity, we'll say. And then that's basically it. So it's going to know about those 2 files. Then every single time you start a session, you should probably put in here, it should be like this. So every time I ask you to hack on a target, read these files to learn about what we have achieved. And this is just going to help Claude catch up to speed every time you start a new session. So I think those 2 things are kind of a must. You can add more files in here, obviously, whatever you want, and you kind of just create a structure like that, which is going to be very nice. And now the last section really is just going to be some kind of files that you are storing on your system. So what I mean by this is that if you have like a script directory or some kind of like JavaScript directory with binaries or whatever, or some directory where you already have stuff stored, you kind of want Claude to know about that directory, right? That directory might not necessarily be on your folder, so you don't want to have these things scattered everywhere. So for example, you'd say, use these like standard directories on my system, and you could say something like script. Actually, make sure you put like the actual absolute path, because the relative path is going to apply to the project Claude is in. And you'd say like put all POC scripts in here. You could say like JS. This is where you find JavaScript files, and then anything else you want Claude to know about. And that's pretty much going to be your CLAUDE.md file. So I would not keep this too bulky. I would kind of keep this general, but just give Claude an idea of what computer it's working in, how you actually work, and what it should kind of focus on, and what it should basically automatically cut out. So remember, these CLAUDE.md files, every time you create a new session, it's going to get injected somewhere at the top, and then I think every time it compacts as well, it's going to get re-injected into the new context. So you don't want this to be too huge, but you also do want to put a decent bit of things here just to save yourself time in the future. So just basically talk about yourself, talk about what Claude should do, talk about what kind of vulnerabilities you're interested in, what impact you're interested in, and then talk about how Claude should report what it finds and how it should find the other things reported by the other Claudes that ran in the past. And this is really going to improve your hackbot a lot, especially this reporting and file section, because instead of everything being, you know, sprayed around your whole computer and Claude never finding it again once it writes it, then Claude just knows where it's at. It's going to read all the markdown files. It's gonna be like, okay, now I understand what's going on. And this actually makes stuff like compaction and clearing of context a lot more bearable to actually, you know, have Claude move forward and continue doing its tasks. So this is kind of nice. That's pretty much it for the CLAUDE.md file. So now you can save it. You can clear that random stuff. And every single time you run Claude from this point on, inside of this directory, you will have this CLAUDE.md file. And we can test that by saying, tell me something you know about me, for example. You could say, tell me something you know about me. And it's going to basically, yeah, how do you know my email? Yeah, basically, it's going to be able to flow that file in and then basically understand what's going on. So that's mainly it for the CLAUDE.md file. And now we're going to move on to some of the skills files. So with the skills files are kind of like the CLAUDE.md file, but they're only injected into context when Claude actually calls them. So whenever Claude actually needs them. And this is kind of the biggest challenge with skills, is writing a good skill that gets called whenever Claude needs it, and making sure that it actually does get called, because some of these skills can get a little bit lost in Claude's context. So we need to build a good description that Claude is going to flag, and that it's going to be able to actually pick it up. And then we have to build a skill where it actually, you know, gives Claude the correct information, and that allows it to use the skill to achieve the task or whatever. Now, I don't like writing these myself because these are a bit annoying to write, and I kind of prefer to Claude to write the first draft of it, and then I usually go in and then kind of do it myself later. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to give Claude something to write the skill about. And in this case, I'm going to use one of the blogs from my previous video, which was on hacking these integrations. And I'm going to ask Claude to make a skill that is going to be able to find these webhooks off any site on the internet. So what I'm going to tell it to do is to read this research in about bypassing payments with webhooks on Stripe. Then I'm going to use this template, and then I'm going to tell Claude to extend it to every single integration out there and build some kind of skill that will, you know, look through every site and basically harvest all the webhooks. So this is what we're going to look for. And this is something quite practical in my opinion, because you're probably going to need a skill like that. So we're going to look here, and I'm going to basically just give it a prompt. So I'm going to just say, write me a skill based off this research. Right, so we're going to paste in the link, and it's going to have no problem going to this link, by the way. Make sure you have these bypass permissions on, because otherwise you're going to be clicking yes a lot. So make sure you have that on before you start this, and then, you know, just type it in. So I'm going to write a skill based off this research, and then I want to tell Claude basically what the name of the skill will be, and then when I want Claude to basically get triggered by the skill. So call this skill call the skill like webhook discovery. So I'm gonna say webhook discovery, and this skill should be activated whenever I ask Claude to enumerate webhooks on a target. And that's basically, you can change the activation. Sometimes you can just say like whenever Claude sees a third-party integration or something. But for now, I'm just going to leave it like this so I can test it a bit later. And we're going to say, whenever I ask it to actually do it. So we're just going to click yes, and we're going to see what happens here. Claude is going to start generating, and the only thing is it might need to load up the default configuration for the skill. So it's going to fetch this website, it's going to list the skills folders, and yeah, I'll get back to you whenever it finishes pretty much. Okay, so Claude is finished there, and it's given us back this skills file. So the skills files for globally are going to be stored in your home directory .claude/skills, and then the name of the skill, and then the skill.markdown. So that's where skills are going to be stored. And to edit them, we just have to go to that directory basically. So we have to basically open this file, and it's created it. You can see this format I was talking about. So this top bit, actually maybe I'll just open it and I'll show you a little bit better. Just go here, say nano this thing. There you go. So this top bit here between these three kind of, what are these, like lines or whatever, they're going to get injected into Claude's context. So you can see here, the name is going to be like, the name on the top, and then the description is what's going to be pushed into Claude's context. And I imagine some kind of system prompt is there, like activate the skill whenever it matches this description or whatever. And it's made this. The description is really probably the most important part of the skill, to be honest, because if the skill doesn't trigger, then it's useless, right? Like if the skill doesn't work, if Claude never invokes the skill, then what's the point of even having it, right? So getting this right is important, and making sure that it's long enough so Claude kind of knows exactly what to call it. It's not too ambiguous, but it's also general enough that Claude actually calls it, on a situation that's not exactly the same as one that was previously, because we kind of want them to be more general as well, right? So yeah, Claude is probably going to, it's probably going to make the skill very long as well. And it might not entirely put a lot of stuff that we kind of care about. The signature bypass endpoints. Okay, this is fine. Yeah, it's gonna do a reporting template. Yeah, that's fine. Honestly, you probably don't need this, to be honest. I like some of the things that it puts in are just really unnecessary, and I'd rather Claude just put whatever it wants to down rather than have some reporting template, because I don't really care, to be honest. And we're gonna have a look. So impact guidance, signature verification confirmed intact. Yeah, like you see, it's like I don't really want it to report this if the signature verification is there, because if it's there, I don't care. So I'm just going to say, impact don't report or whatever. Don't report instead, like this. And then I would have a look at some of the other things. Applying the users when chaining. Yeah, okay, that's fine. And then merely echoes or enumerates without authenticated effect. Okay, yeah, that's probably fine. So a decent bit of it is okay. You can see that because we have the CLAUDE.md file read in, it's already actually doing a lot better than it would have been doing if I didn't have that. It already knows to put things inside this like scripts directory, you see. So the CLAUDE.md file definitely plays a big role here. And it's going to look at some of the things from the actual report, and it's going to write them down here. I'll probably go over this more, especially if I want to put the skill in my global folder. Then I want to have a look, make sure the correct things are being done here. And I might put some of my own context based on my own experience here. So I might create like a bit in the skills file, like user context or whatever, and I'd put in like a vulnerability I found with webhooks, and then I'd put in like some specific details that only I would basically know about, which might give Claude a little bit of an edge when it's looking at this. Search the target orgs GitHub repo. It's probably not relevant either. Path brute force, that's probably actually relevant. And JS files potentially is relevant. Setup reporting. See, this is something that I wouldn't want in here this is something that I would want inside my CLAUDE.md file, but Claude is going to add it here anyway, so I'd probably get rid of this as well. And then I would just kind of have this small context where Claude just basically knows what it should do, like this: verify impact safely. Yeah, I don't know why everybody likes that, but it's just going to no data, no leaking keys, minimal POC. It's probably okay because it's gonna trigger safeguards or something if it doesn't. And then I would probably get rid of this as well, just so it doesn't get confused. So basically the workflow for this is we just, we get Claude to write the skill for us originally. We go in and we edit it to whatever we want to, because Claude is not going to get it right. It's kind of the same with everything. If you make an AI app, then you make the app with Claude, you go in and edit it. So this is just kind of the skills file. And then once we're happy with what the skills file looks like, we're going to save the skills file. I'm going to go back to Claude, and then whenever we want to call it specifically, so if you want to call a skills file, if you want to force Claude to load a skills file, you can put, wait, what did I call this? Was it discover? Yeah, webhook discovery. Yeah, there you go. So you put webhook discovery, and it's basically going to load it automatically. And okay, go away. Yeah, stop that. Wait for a minute. Okay, we're going to test it out for you, but it's basically going to load it into context, and it's going to allow Claude to use the skills straight away. So let's just test it. I'm going to say like webhook discovery, like so, and then after the skill, you can put further context. So obviously Claude is going to need a target for this and whatever. So we're going to put webhook discovery, and then we're going to put like, www.jacobgenbugbounty.de. Like this, it's just going to search my web page for webhooks, and we're going to see how well it does. This is good for kind of automating certain tasks. And there is kind of a version of this that I'm going to talk about in a minute, less in depth because I haven't really experimented with this, but it's agents. So agents is kind of a way of doing this, but instead of being on the main Claude context, it actually spawns like another Claude, and then that Claude has like a very specific task and it goes into that. There's kind of an overlap, I think, between the skills and agents in terms of like things we want to do. And I'm kind of not sure how to use it yet. I'm kind of still figuring out a little bit, but I'm going to show you the reference documentation Anthropic gives out, and kind of some of their guidelines, and kind of some of the way I would interpret it in terms of bug bounty, which is what I would look like. So we can see here, Claude is going through my educational labs here and catch all, and it's probably not going to find anything, or it's going to find some red herrings or whatever inside this billing container. It is pretty cool though, I guess. Watching this AI work is interesting. Whether fourth state changing request. It's gonna go in and try and solve the lab then, I guess, yeah. But yeah, basically you can just see it working. It's gonna work on the skill, and this is kind of nice. The skills are kind of nice because Claude can load it automatically. So when you're kind of hacking at a target, Claude can go in, load the skill kind of autonomously. Like for example, if it sees like a feature that you've hacked on before, you create a skill for that feature. Claude sees the feature, loads the skill up, and tests everything that you've tried against that feature, which is going to make it a lot more effective than if it just tries to test it with its own knowledge. If it uses your previous context and vulnerabilities, that's going to make it a lot more powerful, obviously. So yeah, it's going to write, and you can see the CLAUDE.md file is working because it's writing to the directories that we wanted to write off. So the next time we're going to like basically activate Claude to hack on the same target, we can just say read off these two files, or we just put that inside the CLAUDE.md file, so we don't even have to say it, and it's going to automatically know to do it, which I think is really good. So now I'm going to talk about the two other kind of features, which I myself haven't really experimented with, which are Subagents and Agent Teams. And I'm going to mostly refer to Anthropic Documentation to this, and I'm going to say this for another video. So these are kind of the features that you can use on Claude Code. So this is the documentation for Anthropic, which will be in the description below. And it highlights basically everything that you can use to extend your Claude Code. So obviously we talked about CLAUDE.md file, so persistent context, skills, MCP, which I haven't talked about for kind of a good reason, because it's not used that much anymore for this kind of hacking style stuff. It is used for something, like it is nice for long running sessions, but primarily with MCP, it's going to be better to run a CLI, so just like a command line tool, and create a skill that tells Claude how to use that tool than to use the MCP server, because the command line tool is going to use much less tokens than the MCP server is, and it's going to be longer as well. MCP is good for certain things. It's good for something like Playwright. I have found that the command line CLI is not that great for Playwright because Claude will start a new session every time, whereas the MCP server is kind of continuous. But it has its place, but it has become a lot less kind of used in terms of hacking. And then the two things that I mentioned briefly before, which is subagents and agent teams, which sound very exciting, but we have to really learn how to use these first. And I'm going to talk about them in a minute. And then hooks. Hooks is just something that fires whenever something happens in Claude. And this is mainly for developers for like formatting code or whatever. I don't see a lot of use in this for bug bounty or whatever. And then there's plugins, which basically just allow you to download these other things, but from like a distributed source, which are some cool ones, but most of them are going to be made by you. So let's have a more in-depth look at these subagents. So you can just click in here or whatever. And then with these subagents, basically what they allow you to do is to spawn in, to let Claude, the main session, spawn in like another Claude that it can delegate certain tasks to. And there's a few built-in ones. So the first one is like the Explorer agent. Now, if you've used Claude, you've probably seen this thing before, where like it spawns in and then it just reads a lot of files and it gives like a summary on the files. That's basically running Haiku, which is like Claude's like shit model basically. And what it just does is just reads a fuck ton of files and then it gives a summary on what's going on. This is quick. It's just basically very nice for reading like through a whole lot of files, like JavaScript files or whatever. And then that basically just giving you a summary. This planning agent, which creates plans, pretty self-explanatory. You can tell Claude to plan. It creates like a huge 20k token plan, and then it goes does it, and that's using this planning agent. And then there's just general purpose, which is like anything. So this is, I think, just marked with agent on the top. It just is Claude giving this agent a prompt, and the prompt goes does it. Okay, that's basically it. And then there's I don't know what all these are. These are just random ones, not really relevant. But then you can obviously go make your own agents. So that's kind of the thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit, which basically thing you can do is, instead of having a skill, say for something very complicated, like a specific workflow, for example, instead of having a skill, you can make an agent which is basically equipped to do that specific task. And what's going to happen basically is, let's say you have, your main Claude session running, and you want it to do like reverse engineer. Say you wanted to reverse engineer some binary. Instead of, putting that information in your CLAUDE.md file, basically like destroying the context a little bit or teaching your main Claude how to do that, you can just create a subagent with basically an already existing like CLAUDE.md file. You basically tell it about everything to do with just reverse engineering. And then whenever Claude needs to engineer something, it will just pop that agent into existence. That agent will go in and it will basically start doing that task for you. This is pretty good because instead of like using your main Claude context, you can just create a sub-little agent and have it tailored specifically for those things. So you might not want your main Claude to be aware of like this reverse engineering stuff, know all the tools, know everything or whatever, because it's just going to fill up your context for no reason. But this agent is good because once it's finished, it's just going to give the main Claude a summary of what it found, and the main Claude isn't going to have like polluted context or whatever. So I think this is pretty good, and it's kind of like a skill, but a little bit more complicated. So you can put like multiple things inside a skill. The agent itself can load skills, and the agent itself can spawn other agents, which is pretty cool, isn't it? So it's a little bit of like a more complicated skill for me is what I see. There is a little bit of overlap with the skills and the agents, but the agents seem to be just useful for a more complicated skill. So if your skill is growing a lot and you want to kind of segregate it, you can turn it into a sub-agent. That's basically it. Just to show you how it works, I think I created a sample agent here. Let me just go here, agents. Oh yeah, this thing, book bounty lab fetch. So I created this agent, which is going to just fetch my book bounty labs and tell me what's on them. So what we can do is we can run it manually, or we can get Claude to run it by itself. But we can press run and then we can go, do your task or whatever. You probably put like a more add like a more detailed description here. But once you run this agent, what's going to happen is a kind of sub agent is going to get spawned here. It's going to get initialized, and this is going to be outside the main Claude context. So this is running in like a separate Claude code basically, while the main one is just waiting for some kind of report to come back to the very top. So it's going to do all the fetching or whatever, and while it runs, you know, it's just going to be here. But another cool thing about this is that you can actually configure this quite well as well. Okay, basically you can limit what tools it can use. So if you don't want your Claude to do any writing, you just want it to do specifically research, then you can just limit it to using like read tools or grep or these kind of things. You can disallow tools, and you can only limit it to spawn specific agents as well. There was another cool thing, which is you can add MCP service, obviously, which is you can choose a specific model, which was somewhere here. Now I can't find it anymore. Where was that? Where it was model? Okay, here, for example, you just put this model tag, and you can put like Sonnet or Opus or Haiku, whatever. So this is pretty nice because instead of having like Opus doing everything, you can kind of delegate work to just these smaller models. The main benefit of this is that they're faster. That's the main thing, is that these models, well, yeah, they consume less tokens, but they're also just way faster. So Haiku can run through like the whole JavaScript file in like, you know, a few minutes, versus Opus would be doing it for like hours. Obviously, the downside is that they're kind of stupider, but you know, for something like reading and like giving a summary, these models are completely fine. And you can also enable a feature where when you have like a stupid model, you can actually have it. This is kind of something that you just found about, but you can literally have it like ask a more qualified model what it should do next, which is kind of like an experimental feature that I'm still testing out with. So this is something that you can do. Let's check back on our agent here. Yeah, you can see it basically just ran, and so the main agent here was running, and then it gave a report to our main Claude file, and then it basically found all of this stuff. So this is a way just to keep the context cleared. And you can see that's how that worked. Now there's a kind of more advanced version of this. So there's a more advanced version of these agents. Let's see if I can go back to here. Yeah, we can go back to here, which is Agent Teams. So unlike, okay, there's a cool diagram here actually. Let's just zoom in on that. Oh, too much maybe. Okay, there you go. So basically, you can see that when you have like these sub agents, it just spawns 3 agents. Each of them do some work, and then they give back a result. Versus when you have these agent teams, you have this one like main agent which is like leading it. You have this task list, and like all the teammates are like communicating with each other. I haven't tried this out yet, but this is something that does exist definitely, and I'm probably going to play around with it more, and we're going to talk about this in the next video as well. So basically, this is for like when you have a list of tasks you want to do, but you don't want just your one Claude doing it because you want to save time or whatever, or you want to have like specific agents doing certain tasks that are specialized for, let's say you have like JavaScript analysis, reverse engineering, finding webhooks. You have like 3 agents doing that. You have this like task list or whatever. You would probably create these agent teams, and then do this task. You would just give it a task list. You would say how many agents to spawn, and then this team lead would spawn an agent for every single one of these like tasks, and it would like delegate it specifically. So this is pretty good. Where like in the sub agents, this is good for like if you want like one agent to basically just do like work simultaneously. This is good like if you want to have like your agents kind of collaborating on something and basically doing the work together. So that's kind of the difference of this. And one thing also is that this consumes a hell of a lot of tokens. It's just, you have to remember that. So if basically your tokens are a problem, then maybe don't do this. But what you can do is, this is experimental, so you have to set this flag first. And then you can basically just give it like a prompt like this. So create a team with 4 teammates to do some tasks together. And then Claude will automatically spawn like these kind of teammate structures. And then it will set up like the shared task list for you and do everything. And I think if you use Tmux panes as well, it will like spawn different windows. So you can have a look at each of the agents, and you can be like some AI micromanager, which I think is pretty funny. I haven't really worked with this a lot yet, It's something that I'm going to cover more in the next video. But basically you can set up like teams and stuff, give them like a task list, and you can basically have it work together. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this first video covering some of the things about, you know, Claude configurations, and covering first of all some of the basics, such as the basic CLAUDE.md files and the skills, but hopefully also introducing you to some of the more interesting concepts like the agent teams and the agents that we can use ourselves, which kind of refers to that, you know, agentic thing that I mentioned in the first part of this video, which is kind of what all these companies are kind of talking about, which is how like a main process, Claude can spawn agents now to delegate work to other parts of it, and this can really speed up your, you know, processing time. It's really good for code development. Obviously you can have like different agents working on different parts of the application at the same time. You can have this main coding agent reviewing their work. You could even have it so the agents can't actually do anything until they create a plan that they submit to the main agent, and then the main agent will approve it. So there's honestly just so many cool things about this, and this is, you know, really starting to get very in-depth at this point with so many features. It's almost like this AI stuff is like a full-time job now, honestly. This is going to be like some like AWS management service. It's going to be like AI management service instead. So this is really cool. And I think you can extract a lot of value from just knowing how to use these code models well, especially for hacking, you know, with your internal knowledge, just turning that into like a lead generation machine for you, and just utilizing all these concepts that I've talked about, these agents, these skills, these system prompts, constantly refining them, constantly building out more infrastructure for them, is really going to set you apart from just the people who are running default Claude. You can literally see how advanced this gets. First of all, we started by with just talking to an LLM, and now we've gotten to the point where the LLM is managing a team on your behalf, and you have 4 windows split in your browser where you can talk to all the models, and there's like a management service or whatever, and the AIs are talking to each other. You can definitely see how advanced this is going to get. So learning these basics now and just kind of drilling in basically what we need to do, what we need to learn to get the edge, and how we need to use our own internal knowledge, our own reports, and, you know, research that's coming out to enhance our Claude and basically get the advantage. So I'm very excited for the next videos as I do more research on this myself, and as I go in depth on basically all of these documentations and find out how people are using these Claude models correctly. And I'm very in tune for that. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you get more bug bounty content like this recommended to you in the future, which is definitely going to give you that edge over the competition, because as we all know, knowledge is power. So yeah, do leave a like and subscribe. And yeah, that's it for me. Thanks for watching and happy hunting.